Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen of Hawaii, thank you for joining us. Welcome to our fourth Hawai'i Commercial Kitchens workshop. This one is on supply chain management featuring Cat Zaragoza-Dodge of the Locavore Store. Thanks so much for joining us, Cat. Yeah! So funds for this workshop and program are from the U.S. Department of the Treasury State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds Program, authorized by the American Rescue Plan Act. Yes, let's give them a hand as well. Wait, I have the applause track's not working. Okay. So the County of Hawaii was the recipient of that grant. I am a sub-recipient. And they did this through the Food Security and Agricultural Initiatives Program. So there's about $5 million over 6 categories for funding to support COVID recovery on the island for food-related businesses. You can learn more about this program and also watch our previous workshops on the website, hawaiicommercialkitchens.com. So like I said, this is for any food-related business in Hawaii County that has been in operation since March of 2020. If you don't have a business that's been in operation, that's okay. But if you do, then you're eligible for additional technical assistance under this program, which includes one-on-one business coaching, financial planning. We can pay for your HACCP plan if you need a HACCP plan for a high-risk value-added product. We have personnel management, marketing, permitting and compliance, and also commercial kitchen training. And then all of these future workshops are free and open to the public. We'll be doing one a month. Yeah. So my name is Anthony. I found myself in this position through a mix of different experiences and past that just turned out I've been uniquely qualified to provide technical assistance to Hawai'i Commercial Kitchens. I started my own energy bar business back in Ohio, where I'm from. That was my first experience with shared use commercial kitchens. And then during the pandemic, I started Big Island Box, which is a subscription gift box company featuring only Hawaii Island products. So I was dealing with vendors from all over the island. And then I started working with Ho'ola Farms, doing their Groundwork to Grow education program. So workshops and courses on different agriculture and business topics. During that time, Ho'ola Farms also took over the Hilo Food Hub, which is a commercial kitchen over in Keaukaha. So that's why I'm here. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say a little bit more about Ho'ola Veteran Services. Ho'ola Farms, also known as Ho'ola Veteran Services originally, founded to support veterans, military veterans entering agriculture. That mission has expanded greatly over the years as the nonprofit, like I said, took over the Hilo Food Hub, and then they also took over the Hawaii Farm to Car Market, which is now located in this facility where we are sitting. Raise your hand if you're a farm to car customer or producer. Nice. Okay. If you are not, grab a card on your way out. It is an incredible marketplace for local products and producers. So if you need to shop, it's a great place to get local produce and products. And if you are a producer and you're looking for an outlet, it's a really great way, especially if you're just getting started. It's a really cool initial marketplace. Maybe on your path of agribusiness, you can start at a farmer's market, you can start at Hawaii Farm to Car, and then make your way into the Locavore Store. Kat, do you want to just do a brief hello? Who are you? Why are you here?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for being here. So my name is Catarina Zaragoza. I am here representing the Locavore Store. It's a business that was founded back in 2010 with my partner Arthur. We got our start at the farmers markets actually, and started out with like just carpooling to the market and just pulling surplus from the neighborhoods. It was very, very, very humble beginnings, but we're really proud of the work that we've done to get it to where we are now. If you're not familiar with our shop, we have a brick and mortar in downtown Hilo. We've been operating out of Hilo since 2014. Our whole premise is we're primarily like a grocery shop. We're very small scale, and we only work with Hawaii-based vendors, again, with the focus on food. So our criteria for goods that we carry when it comes to food or anything ingredient-based is that at least some of those ingredients have to be grown in the state of Hawaii. Not bought at Foodland or KTA, but like actually grown here. Our goal is that every product that goes through our checkout counter, a portion of that sale is going back and supporting a local family farm here in Hawaii. So we have added non-food things to the selection over time. We work with a few local artists, local craftspeople, but our main focus is food. We work with about between 200 and 300 unique local vendors each year. That's encompassing anybody that shows up one time with one random crop to people that have been delivering to us twice a week for 10 years. It's a pretty big mix. They are anywhere from really small scale homegrown operations to bigger commercial farms. Hopefully with that experience, I'm gonna be able to shed a little bit of light on how supply chain management works for grassroots businesses like ours. Obviously, my experience is not like ordering for Foodland or these big operations. It's very, very small scale. It's super local, so it's not going to apply to these really large operations. But I think for most of the folks that are tuning in today for this workshop, it's going to be hopefully right in line with where you guys are at, and hopefully be the helpful information that you need.
Nice. Thanks, Kat. Before I turn it over to Kat, I made some pretty wacky slides about supply chain, so I'm going to cover those ones before I turn it over. And I do want to say that I've known Kat for many years now. Before I started Big Island Box, the Locavore Store was like the inspiration, right? I would go in there and be like, ooh, what if I can get this and that, and we can put this in the box. And then I started working with Ho'ola and the Hilo Food Hub, and the Locavore Store was using the Hilo Food Hub kitchen to bottle their coconut water because they didn't have the kitchen space at the old location. But now at the new location, they have their own kitchen. So we worked a little bit there as well. So, all right, let's get into it. A lot of people hear supply chain and you're like, well, what is that exactly? And if you Google it, you'll get kind of a lot of different answers. If you're like, I just want like a basic, what's the supply chain? What's the links in the chain? Well, there's a lot of, it depends on, if you ask 10 farmers, you get 11 different answers, right? Isn't that the saying? So for the supply chain in terms of agriculture products in Hawaii, that's what we're talking about today. So I wanted to make it as simple as possible, right? It's basically every step that you need to take in order to create your product and get it to your end customer. So let's say you are a local carrot farmer. The first step is you gotta farm. Second step, you gotta harvest. Third step, you gotta process those carrots, wash them. Then you gotta package them. Then maybe you sell them at a little bunny farmer's market to to humans, to tiny humans. You grew giant carrots and they buy them at your farmer's market. And that's it. It's a simple supply chain. But that's the simple supply chain. What if you want to, well, first of all, you need to buy things, right, in order to start farming. You're gonna need some sort of raw materials. Maybe it's fertilizer, maybe it's seeds, and those are things you can source, right? You don't have to buy them. Maybe you can trade, but that input in the beginning, that's another part of the supply chain. instead of just retail at the farmer's market, you can sell wholesale in bulk to a store like Locavore. You have the raw materials, right? After packaging, maybe there's marketing, right? Why should someone buy your carrots? What are the names of your carrots? Then there's distribution, right? You got to move your carrots from where you grew them to either where you're selling them wholesale or where you're selling them retail before they make it to the customer. Oh, let's say you want to make a value-added product, a little carrot puree, baby food. Well, the additional links on that supply chain is production. You have to produce the value-added product. There's additional processing. There's additional raw materials that need to go into the production process. You have to buy packaging. You have to make labels. And then again, the marketing, the distribution, the retail. And this is just one vendor, right? So what Cat and other retail locations deal with is that supply chain for 100 different farmers and producers. So it can start to get a little complicated. And this is the reason why I asked Kat to be our supply chain guest for this workshop, because she's the hub for all of these farmers to get their product to the end consumer, right? They're choosing to sell wholesale to Locavore for the most part rather than retail and direct to consumer, because it's kind of a pain in the butt, right? Here's another nice little supply chain food system elements graphic that I found. And I like this because it presents it in a circle, right? It's not just a straight line, it is circular. Here it says resource and waste recovery, right? Maybe you have coconut water or coffee that you're bottling and you want to do reusable bottles. Well, so that bottle return is another link in the supply chain, and it links back to the beginning. Okay, so Kat is not going to talk about every single link of that chain, but she's going to focus on these 4 topics. Take it away, Kat.
So like you saw with the graphics that Anthony found and shared, it can get really convoluted. And actually when Anthony asked me to do this workshop, I was like, I don't know what supply chain management is. No, I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't know anything about that. Because it sounds intimidating. And when I heard it, I think of like just a big manufacturer, somebody that's dealing with like barges of product and they're international, you know, between their supplies and their end consumer. And it just didn't occur to me that like, until I had to Google supply chain management, that, you know, we all are involved in any producer on any level really is involved in supply chain management in some form or fashion, including myself, apparently. And so looking at ways that supply chain management impacts our business, I just narrowed it down to these 4: sourcing, production, logistics, distribution, that we have a little bit more experience with. Again, you know, if you're like a buyer for Foodland or something, I'm not the person to teach you anything. I would be learning from you. But working with a really impressive network of local vendors, we've certainly learned a few things. And so I'm just going to share with you what those things are that we've learned. It is very specific to what our experience has been as a small business that is working strictly with local companies. And so, yeah, it's not going to cover everything, but hopefully it'll cover things that are useful. So basically, the steps that we're going to cover are steps that you're going to be considering looking at once you actually have a product that you're ready to kind of get to the market. And that product can be anything from like, you know, your broccoli harvest or your avocados to like a dialed in, you know, packaged lotion line. So to start with sourcing, it's basically you're identifying and connecting with your suppliers. And that is going to be unique to each business. For us, we only work with local vendors. So that narrows down the scope quite a bit of the folks that I'm interested in talking to and connecting with. And the way that we identify new vendors is, first, are they locally sourced? Is the product that they're making using Hawaii grown ingredients? So that, again, narrows down the folks that we're interested in connecting with. The other consideration for us is what variety does that item add to what we currently are working with. Obviously, we don't want just like the same exact product across the shelf from 10 different people. And there's just like a really good example of this is actually apiaries, beekeepers. So we get approached by beekeepers all the time, which is great. It's a great problem for me to have because it means that there's obviously people out there that are raising bees, producing this really great end product of honey or other products, and they're providing pollination, which is essential to all of my other vendors. But the challenge for me in this particular example has been, well, how do I, work with all these different apiaries without diluting everybody's sales by having the exact same product next to each other? So the way we've kind of narrowed it down in this example is we will make space for apiaries that are in different districts or different ahupua'a systems. So if you're in Ola'a and I only have Hilo and Kohala honey, like we'll pull you in. If you are creating hive products that are not just honey, if you're doing like infused honeys, or maybe you're doing pollen, or if you're doing a really unique variety of honey. For instance, like Kiawe honey and Lehua are obviously very unique. They're very sought after, and that's going to be very different than like our wildflower blossom blends from Puna. So that's one way that we have kind of helped to narrow down a little bit a really, really wide field and be able to still work with as many new vendors as we can. It sucks saying no to people when people are out there growing food and they're trying to feed their families and they're trying to put food out in the community. So we really try to get to a yes somehow whenever anybody approaches us. We can't always do that, but we really do try. So the other thing that we kind of look at when somebody's approaching us or when we're looking to track down a new vendor is having somebody that's experienced really goes a long way. It is not a deal breaker. We have fresh faces come in all the time that are like, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I can grow great vegetables, or I harvest great honey. And so we're certainly willing to meet people where they are. But having somebody that's experienced has a lot of benefits. For example, somebody that has farmers market experience, they're going to have already had the chance to test out their product. If you're out there, the face of your product, you're at the table, you're encountering customers, they're giving you feedback, things that they like and that they don't like. That's pretty invaluable. It tells me that you've probably already kind of developed a message for your product, so you kind of know what are those things that about your item, your crop, that people really like. What are things that they're not as impressed with? How are you messaging that thing that you're selling? It obviously shows that you are committed enough to what you are doing and what you're making that you put that time and effort into popping up somewhere, because that's not a small feat. But for me, it's a little bit, not a red flag, but it's nice to know that somebody has already invested some time and effort into their product before I do as well. And lastly, another kind of critical thing that a farmer's market experience can give you is it'll help you test the market of your prices. Are you getting a price that actually allows you to make a living on what you're doing? Is it competitive, or did nobody bite because the prices were too high? Or are you selling out every weekend? Maybe it was time to raise those prices. It'll just give you some kind of pricing frame to come to the table with. Also, experienced vendors are going to probably have delivery experience, and this, again, is not a deal breaker, but it can be really helpful already having somebody that's had the experience of, harvesting and packing. Maybe they already have a delivery route to Hilo. They already have a delivery schedule. They've kind of dealt with maybe quality control of whatever their crop or their item is, and have figured out, the best way to get their item from where they're creating it to me or to their customer. Additional things that we're looking for in new vendors are folks that are good communicators. And it's really kind of basic, although you'd be surprised at how poorly some people can communicate. But communication is obviously going to come into play when it's things like we're trying to schedule orders and deliveries, and maybe something comes up, or the harvest didn't work out, or the weather is bad. I mean, when you're talking about crops and harvesting, weather is such a huge factor in all of that. Every day. So, it's helpful for me if I tell customers, oh yeah, that broccoli harvest is actually supposed to come in tomorrow. And then you're like, actually, we had weather delays or something happened. But that communication allows us to stay up to date and also inform our customers of what to expect. And particularly those communications are really helpful when there are disruptions, which inevitably there will be. Also, another great quality for vendors are those that are open to feedback. And you can kind of suss that out in people right away. But it is, and for good reason, it's really hard not to take some criticisms personally when it comes to something that you've poured, your heart and soul into. But at the end of the day, that's our job, is to let you know if something isn't working or something isn't up to par. So we have to have a relationship with our vendors that allows us to rely and trust each other's feedback. And to know that it's not personal. Like, we give feedback because we want your product to work out and be successful. We want to show you little minor tweaks or changes that's going to help that product move and see success. As retailers, we are customer facing. We deal with the public all day long. And so we're kind of a front line for quality feedback on things. So when our customers tell us, well, I got that home and maybe, the feta didn't brine properly, or maybe the honey fermented, or these kinds of things, if we're not able to pass that along and have you address that feedback with us, it's not going to work. We have to have products that we can feel confident putting on the shelves because it's our reputation on the line as well. And having folks, honestly, people that approach me, especially that are really new and they're just kind of getting into the sales part of their operation, and they're like, hey, tell me what you think. Tell me what your customers think. Let me know if you have any feedback. That is such a green flag for me. Like, I know that we're going to have a great relationship, and I have a much higher rate of success or potential for success with that person than somebody that, gets butthurt when I tell them that, hey, maybe you harvested those bananas too soon and they're not going to ripen. So that feedback is really necessary for both of us to be successful. Moving on to disruptions, which I kind of touched on, because we're all really focused on food businesses, and somewhere along the line, you're dealing with a fresh product that came out of the ground or came off the tree. Disruptions are guaranteed. So you have to kind of make a plan for what you're going to do when those happen. Some disruptions are really obvious. If you're talking about seasonality, you're going to have a downtime. So what are you doing to maybe fill that gap in that downtime? Or if you're a farm and you have a really seasonal crop, what is your game plan for that off season to make sure that when your next crop comes around, it's going to be successful? What we do as a retailer, since I'm not farming, and I know that seasonality is going to affect a lot of the major crops that we deal with, like avocados and mangoes, everybody's favorite. We will try to find either similar varieties. So maybe our Charbel avocados are going out of season, but green golds are coming in next. So we're trying to line up people that are going to be able to come in and fill those gaps. At some point, avocados are just going to be fall for the season, and same thing with mangoes, which breaks everybody's hearts every year, and everybody acts surprised when it happens, but ultimately it's just a matter of time. But we will try to fill the shelves with other seasonal offerings, because the great things about seasons is when one is ending, another one is beginning. And so if mangoes are wrapping up, that means it's time for oranges. So we're clearing the shelf space, and we're just bringing in new loads of a new crop. The other way we prepare for disruptions is because we have been doing this for a little while and we have a very visible location, we get approached by a lot of new vendors. We have a massive network of people. If you've ever contacted us, hopefully if I remembered to do this anyway, my goal is for everybody that reaches out to us about something that they have available, I write your name and number down and I make notes on what you have and what our conversation was. So that if something happens to one of my regular suppliers, so even if I can't say yes to that person that approaches me that day because maybe they're doing the exact same thing I already have a couple other farms providing, I still take down their information, because you never know what's going to happen between, unfortunately, a lot of farms going out of business because they can't make a living. People move, circumstances change. There's any list of reasons that would affect our ability to get different crops and items on the shelf. And so I will fall back on that list of folks. I will go through my whole little Excel spreadsheet, and I'll start calling everybody that called that had lemons or that had limes or that had whatever it happened to be. So that's my method, which has worked great because we have people approach us all the time. And so that's not necessarily going to be the case for everybody else. So other ways that I will go about trying to shore up our vendor, like our supply lines, are I'll get online, which is why I really encourage folks that are able to get your farm online or whatever your product line is, because it makes you so much more accessible to folks like me or just your other customers. But I found like a lot of our value-added product folks, people that are doing like bath and body products on Kauai or on Maui, people that are not obviously walking into my store every day that I have the chance to connect with. So yeah, finding people online is a great outlet. I will also check in with other food hubs. Like we'll email the guys at FarmLink on Oahu and be like, hey, who are you guys using for this? Because our guy, for whatever reason, isn't doing it anymore. So having, good rapport with your other producers, your other, similar businesses. And then if none of that works, I'll hit up the farmers markets. I'll go Maku'u, I'll go to Hilo, and I'll cruise around and I'll try to find, somebody that's got whatever it is that we're looking for. And sometimes even if I'm not trying to fill a gap, but I just want to see what's out there that I might be missing, going to the farmers markets is one of my favorite things to do. Or like the craft fairs, which are coming up and are about to, I think, have all of us going broke. We are so fortunate to have such a giant network of talented, hardworking, like farms and artisans and craftspeople here that like there's, if you can't find it here, you don't need it. I mean, that's an easy thing for me to say, but I think we really have a fabulous network of people, and it's a great way to get out into the community and connect with folks. So that's sourcing. The next thing I was going to touch on is production. We don't have as much experience with that. The little bit that we do are pretty small lines, like our in-house lines of like coconut water or lemonades, cold brew coffee, that kind of thing. But I will touch on what I can. It won't be quite as in-depth as the sourcing, since the sourcing element is so much more a part of what my experience is in. But the basic requirements for any operation is going to be equipment and packaging on some level. So on the very basic level for your equipment, it could be as simple as the tools that you use to harvest. It could get as advanced as like manufacturing lines and like assembly line equipment. For packaging, it can get really high-end and custom, or it can be as basic as cardboard boxes. So it really kind of runs. It's a really big spectrum depending on where you're at and what you're producing.
If I may add, when you say it could be as simple as cardboard boxes, if you're not in the game and you think, oh, just cardboard boxes, like once you start farming, you'll be like, oh, my boxes, my cardboard boxes, they are a valuable commodity.
Yeah, about half of my backstock space is just boxes and containers that are labeled with the farms that they're supposed to go back to. So yes, that's very true. That's a good point. So for value-added production, that is obviously a little more involved than your fresh crop harvests. But for value-added, the things that you're probably going to be needing are things like a kitchen, like what Anthony touched on with the Hawai'i Commercial Kitchens available. A food permit that says that you're producing your food safely. Although we just had the cottage food law passed, and that's kind of a game changer. I don't know that I can speak on that as much. I'm just kind of figuring out those details myself. But that's pretty major. This is probably not the workshop for that, but.
Well, we spoke about it at the last three, so it makes sense to speak about it again because it isn't official policy yet. So it hasn't been signed. Again, the last I've heard is that it's on the governor's desk, something. So once that finally takes effect, it becomes a lot easier for homemade food and the cottage food producers to be able to make their products at home and then sell them online or sell them wholesale on something like Farm to Car or Locavore. So we're close, but it's not official. I will definitely shout it from the rooftops as soon as I hear.
So yeah, the other elements that you might be looking at if you're dealing with a value-added product would be like labeling, packaging, branding. And when I say value-added, just in case that isn't clear, it's something that's not just raw, whole, and fresh. You're taking, it can be as basic as if you've ever seen like the coleslaw mix that they have at the grocery store. So you've got cabbage and carrots and maybe purple cabbage, and it's just shredded in a bag. Something as simple as that, that's value added. Anytime you're taking it from a whole fresh form into anything else, you're adding value. And in that process, you probably are going to need a package and then a label to say what's in that package, etc. So because this series of workshops seems to have really done a great job of covering like the, what goes into finding a certified kitchen that you can use, what goes into the permitting process. I'm not going to really touch on that as much, but I am going to touch a little bit on the labeling and packaging part, because when we have new vendors approach us, that seems to be a constant challenge, and for good reason. Finding packaging that's going to work for whatever it is that you're trying to get to the market, what needs to go on my label, and then how fancy does it have to be. I think it can be really intimidating for folks, and so one of the things that I kind of want to show you guys is like it can be so simple. It does not have to be super fancy, but the main thing that I like to stress to folks when you're getting started is just get it going. Don't think that it has to be perfect, that you have to have everything super dialed in before you take it to the market or before you approach a farmer's market booth. Just start. Just start it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you should always be perfecting it. Every time you encounter customers or sales, or you're approaching a wholesaler or a buyer like me for wholesale, and you're getting feedback, all of that needs to be going into your product. One of the important things in the beginning as well, so when I say, don't waste too much time trying to get things perfect before you get it out, is because what you think your final product may be may completely change once you actually start rolling things out and getting feedback from people. And this is one of the reasons I feel like farmers markets are so important, because they're such incubators. They will really let you do a lot of that fine tuning and a lot of that trial and error without massive investment on filling up an entire shelf of KTA. It's so much more accessible and approachable. But yeah, give yourself, stay flexible. Your product may end up changing depending on the feedback that you're getting from people. You may think that your 16-ounce honeys are gonna do great, but really everybody wants bulk honeys of like 64 ounce or higher. So maybe instead of buying a pallet of 16-ounce jars too soon, give yourself time to kind of just make sure that some of those details are gonna be reliable long term before you go all in. Another consideration is, especially if you're a farm that's doing farm fresh products, like you're doing pickles or you're doing some beet sauerkraut, put a mix of stuff out there. So when I talk about this, I kind of have in mind that you're trying out a farmer's market at first, or you've got a little farm stand that people are going to swing by on their way home or through your neighborhood, and see what you've got available. But put a mix of things out there, because you never know what that thing, you may be confident, so positive out of the gate that this one thing is going to be your moneymaker. This is this is going to be our new product. This is what we're going to invest our time and energy in. And then you'll just have this random little side thing that you just happen to throw out one day, and all of a sudden that's your main seller. The example I like to give of this is we had, when we were still in Pohoa, this would have been in 2011, 2012. One of our vendors was doing dried and powdered chili peppers, and they were pretty hot peppers. They were the Hawaiians. They were habaneros, jalapenos, things like that. And we would maybe sell one a week. They were not a big thing, but she kept at it. And one day she approached us with these little homemade fruit rolls that she made because she sent them in her daughter's lunch to school. And she was like, I don't know, I just had these extra. I thought maybe you guys could try carrying these with the peppers. And so we said, sure, yeah, we'll put them out there. And we could not keep those on the shelf.
What were they? What product was it again?
A fruit roll. So they were just pureed fruits that she grew at her little farm, like papaya, banana. She actually grew really great berries. And she, dehydrated them on the tray, cut them in little squares, roll them up, and we couldn't keep those. She became that became easily one of the most popular things that we carried. And it was just a total aside, a total fluke, that she just happened to bring by. So I think that really has always stuck out in my mind, and I like to share that with folks because you just keep it open. It might surprise you, that thing that ends up being really successful for you. So get started, keep improving. Sorry, I'm not quite. And also keep, don't be shy about keeping it cost effective. Just use what you have. You don't need to start off expensive and fancy to still look polished and professional. Sometimes simple is easiest and best. I kind of mentioned this at the beginning. When we started at the farmers markets, we did not have a professional spread. We didn't know what we were doing. We just took a bunch of extra produce from around the neighborhood. We didn't have a car. We had a farm truck that we took down there. We didn't have a table. We had a mango slab because our neighbor milled lumber. So he gave us like a raw mango slab, and then we had a bunch of buckets that we used as table legs, and we just kind of like, we got started. So yeah, so don't feel like you have to have it perfect and polished to get things rolling. So that's some value added points. When it comes to fresh crops, obviously a little less, I say a little less involved in terms of like kitchens and permits, and sometimes labeling and packaging. But when you're considering the production of a fresh crop, some things you want to keep in mind is, what is the demand for the crop that you're hoping to put out on the market, take to the market? Is the market flooded? Are you going to grow Wanbach? And is everybody else, maybe, like, is KTA shelves flooded with Wanbach and Foodland and Farmers Market? And if they are, and you still want to go for it, you got to ask yourself, are the going rates that you see out there for that product that you want to grow, is that going to work for you? Can you make a living on that price? And then 2, what makes your crop different or desirable if you do see a lot of it already on the market? And if those things, if there's not really anything that distinguishes it, or the going rates or the going prices are not going to work for you, you may want to pivot. You can do, so something that's, that kind of falls into, kind of like how we considered the honey situation earlier. I can have somebody that's got like a ton of Italian eggplant, and I have so much market for that. And then somebody else comes and like, well, I also have eggplant, and I'm going to say, well, I kind of already have about as much as I can take. But they say, actually, but my eggplant's variegated, or my eggplant's like mini. If it can be as simple as a distinction like that, it can make all the difference in terms of there being room in the market for it. And so I like to tell folks that, like, you want to grow green beans? Well, maybe grow like the mix of yellow and purple and green if you think that there's already going to be somebody, or there's already going to be a lot of those same, green beans on the market. Yeah, so going for like a unique variety, some kind of different color, and if nothing else, just exceptional quality. So if I think that I've got great eggplant and you're like, actually here, just try this sample, because you know that you are really growing something special, people will figure that out, especially when it comes to local produce. Like, people will find that thing, like our lovely person on Zoom that had mentioned the avocados that we get. People will remember if they get good stuff from you. So if you can beat out your competition with quality, there's a lot to be said for that. Another consideration for the kind of crops that you might want to be invested in is it a vetted variety? So one of the situations that we deal with quite often is somebody that's like, well, I have this avocado tree in my backyard and it's popping. And we're like, cool, well, do you know what variety it is? And a lot of times, and this is not a deal breaker, but if it's not a grafted avocado, the chances of it being good and sellable are not super high. And you also have to consider, well, my family eats it all the time. And it's like, well, yeah, but your family didn't pay $4 a pound for it. So you got to consider, is it good enough that I'll eat it for free? Or is it good enough that I would think somebody would pay for it? So yeah, vetted varieties. Does it need to be grafted? Is it true to seed? Do a little bit of research about the thing that you want to put out there to just make sure you're taking into consideration some of those factors that could be really important. You want to make sure that you're harvesting at the right time. I think I mentioned this about bananas before in terms of feedback, but you want to make sure that you're not getting stuff too early. You want to make sure that once you get it to somebody like me, it's gonna continue to ripen up properly. Same thing, on the other end, you don't want to be waiting too late, and your rack of bananas is so ripe that you can't hardly move them without all of them falling off the hand. Yeah, everything has its perfect window for harvestability. That's another area that it's good to kind of research or just get some experience in. Does it have a shelf life? Like, the shelf life of my grapefruit is going to look very, very different than the shelf life of like a ripe avocado. So yeah, everything has its perfect window that you want to consider. And then proper handling. When you're harvesting, you want to make sure you're using the right tools if tools are needed. So if you're dealing with tree crops that need like clippers, the like claw baskets, those kinds of things, you want to make sure you've got the right tools. When it comes to handling as well, we like to tell folks that are harvesting things like avocados specifically, and mango actually, that we don't take grounders. And what that means is if your method of harvesting, actually this would be for like things like ulu as well, but if your method of harvesting is, oh, we're just gonna go through and we're gonna cut them all off the tree and then we're gonna pick them up off the ground later, we're not gonna take those. That might be great if you're gonna eat them that same day, but for things like avocados, those bruises that happened when they hit the ground are not gonna show up until that fruit is ripe. And then I'm gonna be sitting on 30 pounds of avocados that look beautiful on one side and the back half is gonna be all, you know, smashed and not good looking. Had to get one of those in there. Yeah, so, you know, proper handling, you're not bruising, you're not accidentally slicing this is actually really tough with ulu, you're not slicing into your fruit as you're trying to cut the stem and cut them down. Same thing with bananas, sometimes when you're in there trying to get the hands off the rack, you might cut into them a little bit. So just be prepared for those to maybe not be accepted in your batch of produce that you're dropping off. And then wash, depending on what you're growing. You may need to be washing your stuff. Avocados are one of those that maybe not as necessary. Sometimes citrus not as necessary, but you don't want to be bringing stuff that's just got a bunch of debris. Like I can tell if somebody's picked all their lemons off the ground. You know why? Because there's lawn clippings all over them. So you're not going to get that one by me. If you wash them off first, you might. And then, you know, no debris, no doo-doos. Nobody wants doo-doos in their produce deliveries. Because our food grows outside, sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, it's fine, just get a little bit of dirt on them. But you got to consider somebody's going to take that home and they're going to feed it to their family and their kids. And so like a little dirt on the carrots, not the end of the world. Doo-doo in the bananas, not cool. Don't do that. So depending on what it is, again, bananas being a great example, it's where like for us, we don't take them on the rack because I don't know what I'm going to find when I break them down. We've had people bring us bananas and like as soon as we start to get into them, like, oh, look at all those cockroaches come crawling out. That's nice. So we have learned some of these lessons the hard way. But yeah, so bananas are great when you cut them off the hand, rinse them off really well. If you do see like doo-doos, you want to sanitize your fruit. You don't want to just be passing that off to the next person that's not going to know that that was contaminated. Yeah, and then some of your crops like avocados may be a little bit more low maintenance, but you just kind of learn as you go. Make sure they're coming in clean and in good shape.
We skipped over some of these example slides. Do you want to touch on any of the...
Yes, that's what I'm going to do next.
Perfect.
So the next thing to touch on for what are we under? Production.
Yep.
Is packaging. And this can apply to some fresh products as well. You know, strawberries, usually you get them in little containers. The really fancy, like Korean pears, will come in their little, like sweet little netted pillow. But by and large, most of the produce that we work with, unless it's like a salad mix, something like that, there's not really any packaging involved. So this is more for value added, but one thing to keep in mind is to be flexible with yourself in the beginning because you're gonna need that flexibility. For the same reason that you may not know what your exact end product is gonna be, that you're gonna really end up focusing on, your packaging is gonna follow that. So it's a great idea when you're starting to order packaging for whatever your line is going to be to start in smaller quantities. Obviously, it's more affordable up front, and you're going to avoid wasted money and packaging if for some reason it doesn't work out. So yeah, maybe don't order the pallet load to begin with. I mean, there are some folks that they have it dialed in. They've got their business plan, they've got their bank loan, they know exactly what they're going to do from A to Z. That was not me. Every new step, I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna work. So I'm the kind of person that needs that flexibility. And I'd like to think I'm not the only one. So your size and style of your packaging, it's nice to consider options that can be used for like multiple products that you might have. So for instance, if you're doing tea, but you're gonna do a couple of different blends of tea, well, you can use the same bag and more or less the same label to package your whole line. You don't need everything to have its own individual thing. And so having something that's gonna be a little versatile like that is a great consideration in the beginning. And so to give you some ideas, will you go back to go up? Not that one, the other one. Nope, that one. So what you're seeing, these photos are just some examples that I wanted to share of like very simple package. So on the right, The Green Flash Moringa capsules, that's from the Mariama Jones farm. We love those guys. They're over on Kona side. They just had a stamp made, and they just get their sweet little craft bags, and they actually have a black bag as well, and they just use it like a gold ink on it. And so they can just go through and kind of customize each of their bags that way. And they can also make that stamp apply to different size bags, which is nice.
Oh, so this is a stamp.
That's a stamp.
And then this is a stamp.
And that's a stamp. Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. You've got Waiholukui Tea Garden, or Waiholukui Garden. They actually have a super sweet shop in Pahoa, but we get some of our tea blends from them. As you can see, they've just got kind of like a standard gusseted window bag, and they've got a label that could be put really on any bag if they needed it to be. On the top left, there's Pala Pala Designs. They do a set of drink mats, like individually stamped drink mats, and they've just got this very simple paper label that goes around, and it holds the set of drink mats together. And then on the bottom left is Mikey from Hawaii Seed Company. That's his seed line. So the envelopes themselves are white, and then they just got white, black and white labels on them. So yeah, these are great examples of it does not have to be fancy to get started. It can be super, super simple and still look like really nice and professional. Another consideration around packaging, as you kind of get dialed in and you're like, okay, I know the direction I'm headed. I know what I'm ready to like invest some more time and energy into. You can bump up, your volume and the scale of the orders that you're putting in for that packaging. And the benefit of that is there are usually price breaks when you're getting into those bigger orders, and you can get customized, which obviously adds a whole nother level of looking polished to your line. But again, those are usually only available for larger orders. It's obviously more commitment to the size and the style. And there's more upfront cost, but when you're ready and you're at that stage, it's totally worth it.
When you say like only for larger orders, what's that mean? What's a large order?
So that could be like, instead of going and getting the little stack of like Avery labels from Office Depot that's got like 25 sheets in it, you could be looking at, I just ordered a roll of 10,000 stickers. Actually, another consideration around that you can do, sometimes you can get away with doing those bigger orders for something like a label and leave yourself blank spaces for maybe your size or quantity or the flavor. So you can take advantage of that price break and still be able to commit to a big volume like that. But yeah, sometimes those price breaks don't come. For labels is a little more reasonable. I mean, 10,000 is still a lot, but that looks a lot different than ordering like an entire pallet of cans or bottles or something like that. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And so these are just some examples of custom packaging. There's Maui Fruit Jewels on the bottom right, very custom. Their packaging looks phenomenal. And their whole line is branded to look like that. There's another example of them, the two on the right are Maui Fruit Jewels. And then Meli Wraps on the left-hand side, obviously custom boxes for their beeswax wraps. So that's what you can get into, but certainly not necessary to get started and get on the shelf. Because all those products that you saw, we have all those on the shelf. So that's not going to be the deal breaker for us. Like we'll help you make your label if that's the one thing that's keeping you from like getting ready. That's not a free service that I'm trying to advertise either. But we've certainly done that with new vendors that are like, shucks, I'm just really stuck on this one piece, and we're like, oh, we can, we have that size label, or we're happy to help in that area when we can.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll do at Hilo Food Hub as well. Not so much at Farm to Car. We just have too many vendors and not enough people and time. But if you have been in business since March of 2020, you are an eligible recipient of Hawai'i Commercial Kitchens technical assistance, and I will help you with your logo, label, etc. Do you want to talk about these ones?
Not yet.
Not yet,
That's
okay.
the white label. So lastly, in production, kind of once you've taken a stab at like your initial run of packaging, you've figured out what kind of products that you're going to get started with. it'll give you a good sense of what your pricing is going to need to be. And I think a lot of people skip that part, especially when you're starting really grassroots and you're like, I don't know, I just have all these carrots that I have to do something with, or like I've got all this honey that I just got to get out there, or all these oranges that are just, you know, rotting on the ground. As tempting as it might be to just be like, I don't know, it's $1. Try not to do that. A, for yourself, because it's just not, it's not sustainable long term. You're going to burn yourself out, and then you're going to be bitter that, like, you know, you spent all this time and energy into something and weren't able to make any money on it. But it's also a disservice to the people that are maybe making something similar or growing something similar to you, and they have taken the time and the energy to dial it in and to figure out what that cost needs to be, and they are charging a fair price. And then you come in with your, like, you know, $1 for 5 oranges, and it's really not fair to either of you. So try to take the time to figure that out up front. It is easier to put a fair price out there on your product at first, and then realize, actually, I can come down on that maybe later because I've gotten more efficient, or I did that big order of packaging and it cost me less to make now. So you can come down on your price. It is easier to go that direction than like, oh, I never took the time to figure that out, and now I actually need to charge 4 times what I did initially. And then
I won't do that again. I'm sorry.
Obviously, and we've all seen that with inflation, right? Like, nobody likes to go to the store, and that thing that they were kind of budgeting for is now however much more than it was. So yeah, you know, best case, you can come down on your prices as you go and you get established. You know, worst case, you're going to have to raise it as you go. So try not to do that if you don't have to. But at the very least, do your research so you can get a fairly accurate price in mind when you get out to go to the market. So that's it for production, mostly. And the next thing is logistics. So because, again, our experience is very skewed because we only work with local folks, so we're not really having to deal with a lot of like ocean freight, pallets and barges. A little bit of that for some of our inner island folks, but not too much. Most of our folks are just driving their stuff to the store, so it's fairly upfront. But I will cover like what some of our experience has been with that. And one of the main things that we try to do where logistics are concerned is we try to make it really efficient for our vendors. We try to work with them whatever their schedules are or whatever their limitations are. So if they can only get to Hilo once a week, twice a week, once a month, we try to consider that when we're placing our orders. And then, you know, if they're coming less frequently, obviously I'm going to have to adjust my orders and my frequency based on that. And then if they just find themselves at, like, for instance, our folks, Crooked Sea Ranch, they do a lot of our gold oranges. They're down in Naʻalehu, so their kids are super involved in sports, and so they would be up in Hilo, usually on Saturdays for games. And we typically don't take produce deliveries on the weekends, but we made exceptions for them because that was the only day that they were going to be in town, and they're coming all the way from Naʻalehu. So we were like, well, just come in, drop them, and we'll, you know, when we're back on Monday, we'll take a look at them. So we certainly try to work with people where they're at. If it's not deliveries, if they just happen to be coming into town for errands or whatever it is. And then we also have this fabulous local trucking company that we work with, and they have been just a boon for us in the sense that we're able to work with vendors on the other side of the island that have no intention of driving to Hilo on any regular basis. But with this great family-run trucking company, we're able to still pull in products from over there, and it obviously is helpful for us, helpful for the vendor. They're still able to get our business, but they're not having to figure out how they're gonna work that long drive in. Yeah, so we're always happy to tap into our logistics network. So order frequency is going to be determined by what your product is. So how often I'm ordering from you depends on, you know, where you are, what you have available. If you are doing fresh things, I'm probably going to need to be ordering those more regularly because it's not going to sit on the shelf forever. And whereas shelf-stable products, you know, maybe I only need to order it once a month. Maybe it's only every few weeks or just as needed. We will try and consider as well if our vendors have, again, a schedule that they're trying to work with Hilo deliveries. You know, I'll order whenever they're going to come, or if they have a minimum order that I need to meet to get them to come or to get them to ship. Then that's obviously going to affect how often I'm going to order, depending on how much I need to order at a time. Some of our vendors will do discounts for different quantities ordered. So like not always a bulk discount, but if you're ordering more than 50, you know, it's this price range, or more than 100, it's this price range. So we will obviously try and get our orders to those numbers that are going to get us a little bit better rate. But again, that's also going to affect how often we need to order. If I have to order a lot, I may not be ordering as often. And then shipping and freight charge consolidation. For things that are shelf stable, typically, this is a consideration. So our folks that are off island, like for instance, we work with Maui Bone Broth, and they're on Maui. And to get our orders from them, there's like a minimum freight order. And so it's not worth it for me to just order, one case of something, and then freight alone is going to add like $10 a unit to my wholesale costs. So I'm going to try to like bulk up that order as much as I can, but then I may be only ordering like once every 2 months or so. So yeah, a lot of considerations where that's concerned for order frequency. And then, yeah, that's more for, a little bit more for the value-added stuff, but for fresh things, logistics to consider are, what I consider logistics for fresh things are like your packing and transport. Some of these seem really obvious, but I'm gonna cover them anyway because to many people they're not obvious. Use clean stuff to bring. It's the same doo-doo policy. You're not trying to bring dirty stuff to sell, especially when we're talking about food. We're dealing with food. Your packaging, your containers should be clean. Used is fine as long as they're clean. They're in good shape. Don't overpack and overfill where your produce is concerned. Especially, you don't want things rolling and falling out. You don't want your boxes to not be able to stack because they're so full they won't close. Obviously, you run into the chance for things to bruise or get damaged if they're overpacked in containers like that. Be mindful of using things like padding and layers. There's some really delicate stuff, like mountain apple, such a pain. It's one of my favorite crops. And it's also why we charge a premium for it, because in order to get one off the tree into your truck or your van and then to us, and then us get it on the shelf and still have it be in good shape is like, it's a miracle every single time it happens. Because they're so fragile. So we try to encourage people when you're dealing with fragile crops like that, use padding, use layers, just be mindful of those things. You want your thing to arrive at its destination in good shape. Anything from like newspapers to some people will just use like retired towels, bubble wrap. It's especially useful to consider padding and layers when you're dealing with sappy produce. So bananas, if you just break all your, you cut all your bananas off the rack into hands, and you just stack them all on top of each other. As they ooze latex, it's just gonna kind of get all over the rest of your bananas, and there's not really any getting that off. And something to think about is whenever somebody goes to pick that up off the shelf, if they're just getting like a fistful of banana latex, or it looks all kind of dirty because that latex is on there, that's not really a great experience for them. They're maybe gonna pass on that. And then same thing with things like ulu, when you're packing those items, stuff that's really leaky, like ulu is super leaky when you first harvest them. Some people just like actually leave them out in the field, stem down, and just kind of let them leak some of their latex for like overnight even before they bring it in. But if you can't for some reason, just be mindful wherever that cut area is that they might be kind of leaking latex from, you wanna put that latex side down, I guess, on some newspaper. And don't just pile them on each other, because ulu are like very latexy, like they'll just kind of leak on everything. And you don't want to ruin the rest of your fruit in that just because it's got latex everywhere. So yeah, for fresh packing and transport, that's something to consider. For value added, it's worth taking the time to dial in your packing materials if you've got things that are actually in containers. It's great. I mean, we work with people on a lot of different scales. Some folks, they ship us stuff and it's just perfectly dialed in, like little cubbies for every little item that's in there. And that's like on one end of the spectrum. And then the other end is like, we get a couple of fragile things in a box and there's like 2,000 sheets of newspaper that's kind of crammed in there, keeping them, and it gets the product to us safely. And at the end of the day, that's the important thing. But we then have to deal with those 2,000 sheets of newspaper, and that's not always the funnest thing or the best use of our time. When it comes to the freighting your value added, you want to do your research to find out what's going to make the most sense for obviously where you're sending your items to. We've got great local options like CFI, Young Brothers, Aloha Air. A lot of our guys use FedEx and USPS. You can also ask potential buyers that you're going to be working with if they have preferred like freight or shipping partners, can save you a little bit of time and effort that way. You can also just talk to other vendors, other people that are selling, they're kind of in that industry, if they have good or bad experiences with any of those channels. It can be a little daunting, and it can be difficult sometimes to get the exact information you need from various freight operators. Like getting calls back from Young Brothers and CFIs may not always be the fastest, most direct thing. So if you have somebody that can kind of tell you that they have good experiences with them, can help you kind of narrow down who you want to be working with. And in that process, it's a great idea to be using things like emailed invoices and tracking notifications to make sure that, like, if something's leaving you and getting handled by a bunch of people before it reaches its end destination, you just want to make sure you have tabs on where that's going. And particularly if you're freighting stuff, you want to have a plan for if something does not arrive in the shape it should. You're gonna end up with dealing with damage at some point, so just kind of keep that in mind and have a policy for how you want to address that when it happens, because it will. So storage for logistics. If you're somebody that's kind of cranking out big batches of stuff, so you have them like ready in a warehouse somewhere to ship out as people are ready to order them, which is a great benefit of value-added products. You want to, I'm kind of skipping ahead. Well, I'm doing value-added instead of fresh, sorry. You want to make sure that you're storing them appropriately. You want to have them somewhere cool, maybe somewhere temperature controlled, somewhere obviously just not sitting in the sun. It's not traveling around in your car with you for 3 weeks until it gets where it's going. For fresh items, you want to ask yourself, does this thing need to be refrigerated before it gets where it's going? Don't, store your freshly harvested avocados just like in your driveway in the sun where they're going to get sunburned. If you just harvested a bunch, like a crate of fresh greens, don't just leave it on the grounds until the next day when you're ready to take it in. And now all of a sudden there's, 7 slugs that have found their way in it since then. Just be mindful of where you're storing things until they're ready to go where they're meant to be. And then particularly, again, with fresh stuff, the timeline, don't harvest things so early that by the time it gets where it's going, it's maybe getting too ripe. Some things have really, really short shelf life, so you just want to be mindful of whatever it is that you're working with and the time frame that you have to work with them in.
Does anyone have any specific questions about produce storage for CAT? Because I know this is something that I think some people are even like embarrassed to ask sometimes, like, should I refrigerate this or should I not refrigerate this? So if anyone has any specific, and it's not a blanket like, oh, all fruits and vegetables you refrigerate at the same temperature. So if there's any specific questions, now would be a good time for those. Does anyone have one? April, can I have you come to the mic? Yeah.
Supply chain woes. How many different storage temperatures do you guys have in your supply chain, right? There's usually like dry, cold, frozen. Do you have tropical? Do you have...
I wish we had tropical. Our version of tropical is just like room temperature in a spray bottle.
Okay.
We don't even really have like the produce cooler like you see at like Island Naturals and Abundant Life. Ours are fridges, and they're their whole own thing to deal with fresh produce because they dry everything out. That's what they kind of want to do. So we have our fridges, which are kind of like a hybrid style for our produce, where we're misting stuff throughout the day, and we'll cover fresh veggies in those fridges at night. We have things like cucumbers and zucchini that will be out on our shelf during the day, but those get wrapped and put in the fridge at night. Okay. There are some fruits that once they're ripe, like avocados, for instance, if they're ripe on the shelf at the end of the night, those go in the fridge to extend shelf life. But yeah, ours is pretty basic. We've got our frozen section, our refrigerators, and then the shelf, and then we have some products, like I said, that kind of live between the fridge and the shelf.
We had struggled with a farmer that refrigerated basil. Yeah.
Basil does not like the fridge.
No,
it wants to brown.
Expensive loss for them.
Right away. For basil particularly, there's a variety. I think it's like a mammoth. It's not a mammoth. I have to ask them. So the McCall farm in Volcano, they're the only people almost that will buy basil from, unless it's live basil that can sit on the shelf in water, because whatever variety they're growing doesn't brown in the fridge. But Yeah, basil's a hard one.
Shout out McCall Farms in Volcano. If you haven't been there, they have a short, like, you can visit and buy straight from them on like some weird hours. McCall Farms, Volcano, check them out. Berries, they have fresh berries. What do they sell on Farm to Car?
Good question.
Farm to Car, HawaiiFarmToCar.com.
Okay, so after logistics is distribution, which is essentially you're getting your product to your customer efficiently. There's a lot of sales channels, a lot of different avenues that you can make that happen. I'll just cover a couple of them. Direct to consumer is probably the best one, especially if you're starting out. You'll get the highest revenue on your items because you're selling at like a retail price, but obviously comes with overhead costs and your time. So it certainly requires a lot more of your time. There could be possible like fees like at the farmer's market, rent if you're doing brick and mortar, payroll if you're paying somebody to be there to sell products with you. Some in-person examples of the direct-to-consumer or the farmers markets, again, because I'm a big fan of those. I think everybody should do that. I feel like it's a great testing ground. Brick and mortar, like what we have, our retail store, and then pop-ups, which we're about to see a lot of again with Mary Monarch coming through. But a lot of our vendors actually will collaborate with other brick and mortar stores to do pop-ups at those locations. Crib Hawaii is actually a great example. They're a children's consignment boutique in Hilo. They have vendors come and pop up with their lines all the time, and it's just a cool way to get access to the public. That's a little less overhead and less commitment than renting your own retail space, which is obviously a very big commitment. But still really important because you're getting that face-to-face with your customers, and that's invaluable. Social media nowadays is a great potential. I've seen so many businesses grow through their social media business. Like, they just start making cakes out of their personal kitchen for friends and families, and then it grows a little bit from there. But it's a fabulous way to just get the ball rolling. That's a little bit less committal. And I think social media sales are a really great addition to if you're already at a farmer's market or you want to do a farmer's market or you're a vendor that's doing pop-ups. Social media is a really fabulous addition to your sales channels. And it's a great way for people to, if you're a small business that doesn't have like a full-time location, social media is a really fabulous way for people to see what you're up to and what you're doing, since they can't really just stop by and see you all the time. And it's a great way for people to ask you questions about the products that you're doing, and a great way for you to tell your story about whatever it is that you're making. And kind of adjacent to social media is online. Having an actual online store, it is its own kind of monster to deal with. It can get expensive with subscriptions and things. There are low maintenance and cheaper ways to go about it, but it can be like a very low maintenance way once you have it set up to get your product out there in front of people and to get orders to come through. And it's a great way for people like me to find you when I'm like, shucks, I need somebody that's making lip balms with local ingredients. So I'm looking for that stuff online. And direct to consumer, again, a huge benefit to that is it's just such a fabulous opportunity to improve your product because you're dealing directly with your customers and you're getting that feedback straight from them. And if they're not happy with whatever you're doing, then obviously it's not going to be that successful. Wholesale is another channel. That's where most of my experience is as a buyer. It's lower revenue for you per unit, but if you're a Longan farm, you're just trying to unload that harvest when it's there and while it's fresh and still good. So you're going to be hard pressed to not be utilizing wholesale sales channels for that particular type of crop. So it's lower revenue per unit, but it's also less overhead for you because you're not dealing with rent, things like that. Your considerations for whether or not wholesale might be a good channel for you is volume. Do you produce enough volume to make it worth it and to make it like a livable wage or revenue for you at wholesale prices? And then the type of product that you have. Some people have really, really, really niche products, and you almost have to have either that face-to-face with the customer to explain it and talk about it, or you need a really good marketing game that you can convey that same information on the shelf. Some things just don't stand alone on the shelf very well by themselves. Some things do great. But there is sometimes like a medium or like a middle ground to that if you've got marketing materials to kind of bridge that gap between you and your product story and your customer. If you are going to tackle wholesale, it means you're gonna have to put your business out there and you're gonna have to start approaching buyers like me. And so I'll give you some pointers, things that we have learned that make a really good impression, and then things that make a terrible impression, just to improve your chances of success as you get rolling. This tends to be more the case with value-added products, but a one sheet, or what's called a one sheet, which is essentially like a summary of the product that you have, it will give me the details I need about your product, like your contact information. Say, I really like what I see. Can I get in touch with you? Your pricing is going to be one of my first questions. It could be beautiful. It could be exactly what I need, but is it going to be affordable? If you have different sizes or options of that product that you're selling, it's a great idea to give a little bit of a backstory so I know who I'm dealing with. You know, where are you from? What makes your product unique? What makes your story unique? And if there's any particular product highlights, like for me as a buyer, I'm looking for stuff that's made locally. I'm looking for things that are grown in Hawaii. So if you feel like those are the things you want to highlight, you know, you want to put those small details in there as well. Or if there's anything else that you feel like makes your product stand out or makes it special. Like Hamakua Toffee Company, they're really interesting because it's like a 7th generation recipe that they're using. And that's a cool point to include when you're trying to put a product out there. And any ordering info, if you happen to have any, if you have like a minimum order, if you have like a lead time, say you're really small and you're like, I want to fill these orders, but it might take me a month, all that is really helpful. The most important thing though is your contact information. So if I have questions that aren't answered in that one sheet, I can still reach out to you and figure those out. And then photos of your product is really, really, really helpful. It could sound great on paper, but look terrible in person. And that's kind of a good thing to know out of the gate. Samples can be really helpful, again, particularly on value-added stuff, or if it's something that's a little unusual that, you know, somebody may not be familiar with, a sample is going to go a long way in letting me know what it's about, if it's worth my time, and if I feel good about putting it on the shelf. Samples can also be really good if you have a fresh product, like I said, like eggplant, like, oh, it's eggplant, like how different can it be? But if you have that beautiful variegated variety, if I see that come through the door, I'll stop what I'm doing to like make sure that I get your information. So there are certain examples of fresh products that it's worth dropping one off. Or again, if you just have, you know that you have exceptional quality of something, it's worth dropping a sample off. And then I cannot stress this enough for folks, don't be afraid to follow up. If you've dropped off your information, you left a one sheet, you called and left a message and you didn't hear back, check in again. Don't assume that, unless you get a hard no, someone's like, please stop calling me. Unless you get that, check in again. Give them a week, give them 2 weeks, whatever time frame you think is good. Keep track of those people you have left samples for that you've tried to get in touch with and follow up with them. I try really hard to get back to everybody that reaches out to me, but I drop the ball all the time.
Chances are maybe you're a little busy.
Sometimes the days get full and disappear before I know it. But I love somebody that will follow back up with me, and I will apologize profusely, as I always do, when I drop the ball and fail to get back to somebody in a timely manner. But I'm also the kind of person that, like, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you just bug the crap out of me all the time, chances are you'll wear me down and I'll put your product on the shelf. not to out myself, but I mean, but it's true. If you really put. I said you weren't going to do that anymore.
No, that's just the air horn I won't do anymore.
Okay. But yeah, following up really does make a really big difference. And again, don't feel like just because you don't hear back, it's because they're not interested. I think rarely is that the case. Usually if there's something that I'm really not interested in, I will get back to you faster to let you know that than if it's something that I just don't have the time to like wrap my head around or compose an email to ask my questions and kind of go through that process. Actually, I will say this. I said, oh, don't bug them if you get a hard no. That's not really true. Give it 6 months and check in again. You never know. Buyers change. Their list of suppliers can change. All kinds of things can change. So even if you get a hard no, but it's really somebody that you want to work with or you're really confident that like it would be a great sales channel for you, give it some time and then check in again because you never know. Ways to not make a great impression, and these are just my personal pet peeves in dealing with like a very wide variety of people. this isn't the worst thing, but don't show up to try to meet with somebody with no notice. Like, don't expect FaceTime if you're just kind of coming in off the street in the middle of a busy workday. I mean, that would be like me showing up to your place of business in the middle of your having 100 things to do that day and expecting them to drop everything. If I can, I absolutely will. But a lot of times, it's not great timing if it's not planned for. You know, like Anthony was saying, buyers, especially those of us that work with small businesses, we wear 100 hats and we've got 1,000 little commitments throughout the day, and it can be hard to handle surprises like that. We have full work days just like anybody else. So do your best to try to schedule the time to meet with somebody if you really want to get that face-to-face with them. Or even better, the thing that usually gets the best traction with me, if you call and leave your information or you drop off your information, that kind of acts as like a little bookmark for me. And I'm like, okay, here's my pile of people that I can get back to. And then I can do it on my own time. I'm not rushed. You'll get like the better side of me as opposed to like the rushed, irritated side of me, which is better for all of us. And a big don't is don't harvest your whole crop and then show up at my door and think that I'm gonna buy it all when I've never met you. I didn't know you were coming. I don't know what you have. I haven't vetted your product. I don't know what your prices are. Don't do that. And then don't do that and then be upset with me when I'm like, I'm so sorry. I can't take this 200 pounds of origins that nobody told me was coming today. Because A, you wasted your crop. I mean, you can do a lot of running around and you may be able to unload some of it, hopefully, if you're lucky, or you might just be, you know, ending up taking like 25 cents a pound for something because you kind of need to get it unloaded and that person knows that they're your last, you know, or they're your last option. And there's definitely folks that'll take advantage of that. So it seems like an obvious one that has certainly happened before, but just communicating well with people, especially around harvesting fresh products, just to make sure that it's expected, it's dialed in. Then you can make sure that the stuff that I just spent all this time harvesting and packing and driving, I'm actually going to sell it. There's actually, you know, I'm gonna get paid for it. There could also be factors, like for us, depending on what you're growing and what you're bringing us, and if you're a new vendor, there may be quality control factors that we want to go over with you first before we say yes to bringing in your stuff. Some of the things that we covered before, like I want to make sure you didn't drop all your avocados out of the tree before you brought them to me. I want to make sure that you know that your bananas are at the right stage of harvesting and not getting harvested too green before I commit to buying them. Because what I don't want to do is spend a bunch of money on a crop and then have none of it ripen up properly or all of it goes bad. We want it to obviously work for both parties. And then lastly, my big don't is don't show up to my store and look around and start talking stink about my other vendors and their products thinking that that's somehow gonna like get you good favor with me. Because, oh, you know, my cabbage is actually a lot nicer than that. Don't do that. That's guaranteed I'm not going to work with you on that stuff. Because, I mean, obviously it's unprofessional, it's bad etiquette, and anybody that's trying to, you know, denigrate like our other local farmers that are obviously working really hard to do what they're doing, not somebody that I'm really interested in working. For some reason, some folks think that that's like a win, that's like a home run for them, and it's really not. So if you think your product is really that much better, and you could come in and be like, gosh, their stuff really doesn't look that good compared to what I'm growing. That's great. Don't say that. Prove it. Bring me a sample of that thing that you think is really that much better. You know, do it tactfully. Just, you know, be considerate about your approach. And those are all my pet peeves. Or that's my short list of pet peeves, anyway.
Nice.
Lastly, since we are dealing with sales channels, the last sales channel that is an option that we have worked with is what's called white labeling. You're basically giving your product kind of in bulk or in mass, unlabeled, and maybe not entirely unpackaged, but it's not retail packaged to somebody like me. And then I basically break it down and get it on the shelf. I take care of the labeling, I do all that stuff. So we do that with a couple of different vendors and different products from them. You can do that if you want to do the slide.
I have this one too.
Yep, that's perfect. So some of the things we do that with is, I always mess up their company name. I don't know why, it's like so easy. It's the Honeybee Company, not the bee company. The Honeybee Company, we buy bulk 5-gallon buckets of honey from them, and then we break it down into 9-ounce, 16-ounce, and 32-ounce sizes. They don't have to do they don't have to provide the packaging. You know, they're not dealing with bottling and sourcing the jars and getting the labels on or putting the heat seal, the tamper-proof things on. We do all that. We buy bulk smoked fish, smoked marlin and smoked ahi from, and actually the sakuraboshi as well, from Hilo Fish Company, and we break those down into retail sizes and resell those. Hamakua mac nuts, they provide all of our in-house mac nuts are from those guys. We buy them 25-pound cases at a time, and then we break them down. So they're unloading bulk, and they're not having to worry about the individual retail packaging. So for some folks, that's a really helpful option. We show them the spice slide next. Even for some of our guys that are not even that big, they're not doing 25-pound cases of stuff, but they do have like nutmeg that they don't know what to do with. Almost every single spice that we carry, and we've got a pretty impressive selection right now. They're probably every single one from a different farmer that just happen to have like a little batch here and there. And so that's been really helpful for some of our folks. A lot of the guys that are actually bringing us spices, they grow other fruit for us, and this is just kind of an aside, but they can unload this crop that would otherwise kind of be a pain for them to try to package and label these really small quantities. Seth and Evan, who do Grow Green, they do the Kalo patches and agroforestry lot at OK Farms. They've been bringing us like pounds of freshly dried and powdered olena and ginger, which we're super, super excited to get our hands on. But same thing, they're like, here's this pile of stuff, and then we can break it down from there. And we're set up to do that, so it saves some of our vendors some time and effort, and then we're still able to get their crop out there and get it used while it's still in good shape and still fresh. Yeah, that is the end of the presentation. I really hope some of that was helpful. I know it's a lot. Yeah, supply chain is massive, but hopefully there's a couple of things to glean that may be helpful for you guys as you get up and running. And then two, if you guys ever have specific questions about kind of any of the stuff that we covered, you can reach out to me anytime. One of my favorite things to do is to answer those questions from folks and to maybe save anybody a little bit of time and trouble and trial and error, working through some of these kind of wonky situations when you're just starting. So by all means, I'm always available by email and by scheduled appointment.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kat. That was amazing. BigIslandLocavoreStore.com if you want to check out the website. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to close this Zoom out before I'm tempted to play any more sound effects. And Kat, thank you so much. Thank you to the Locavore, and we'll see you there. Bye, everybody.